All right, Carmelo, Carm, as we call you in the biz. Welcome. How you doing, buddy?
Good, you, man. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, it's great. I'm honored. Listen, full disclosure up front, I'm a big fan of SprayNet. I'm such a big fan of SprayNet that I bought all the territories that SprayNet would allow me to buy. So I bought 3 territories. For those of you who don't know or haven't watched any of my other videos about SprayNet, Carmelo is the founder, CEO, the force behind SprayNet. SprayNet is, in my humble opinion, the most cost-effective way to modernize a home or a property, and the most cost-effective way to improve that property's value. And we do that through factory finished proprietary coatings. I don't even like to call them paints. I like to call them coatings. And we bring the factory to the property. We make it look incredibly beautiful. We don't compete with traditional painters. We live in the world between traditional painters and replacement. We're far less expensive than replacement. And when I saw this, and after I did my due diligence, I realized what a game changer this was. And so you guys let me buy 3 territories. I wanted to buy more, but you said, whoa, big fella, buy 3. We'll see how you do. Anyway, that is SprayNet in a nutshell. We're doing roofs and painting windows and siding and stucco and staining brick and doing kitchen cabinets. And the list is pretty stout. We only touch stuff where we have proprietary coatings. And I know this is a big intro, but the cool thing about this is, Carm, you're the one who made all this happen. And you were just out in Colorado. We did a video. We did an upflip video. And we got to go to dinner, and we talked before, and I was on the intro calls, but I didn't realize or appreciate what a force of nature you are, and how smart, and how much you've guided even the chemistry, and how much you knew. I knew you had chemists on staff, but I didn't know the depth of and force of which you were into this. So so that's a long-winded intro of to the point that I'm honored to have you here, and let me ask you a whole bunch of questions. First and foremost,
What correction though, Chris? I mean, the force behind SprayNet really is people like you. We start I think you said in the upflip video, we built the race car, but without good drivers, the race car doesn't matter, right? So we both need each other. We both contribute to the force of SprayNet.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's been interesting when you say that, I'm just going to jump into this. I've noticed that some people, in my due diligence, some people take an adversarial approach to their franchisor, right? The franchisee and the franchisor butt heads, as opposed to work together. And for me, it's insane. It's a no-brainer, because you built this thing. You know the most about it. You've built coaches, and we should be, like this. It's a partnership. To be butting heads with your franchisor if you're a franchisee, and I don't even care if it's SprayNet, it could be anything. That's madness, right? So yeah, I do like that analogy. You built a race car, man, a race car, and it is sophisticated. And you're not going to learn to drive this race car in a week, right? It ain't going to happen. So anyway, we're in first. We're railing in first gear. I think we're doing 90 miles an hour. We're pushing in the clutch, ready to drop it into second. But no, that's a good point. So when did this whole thing start? You're about 14 years into SprayNet. Is that right?
Yeah, the idea started, the seed for the idea started in 2009. 2010 is when we kind of actually, went out there and marketed this and did our first few homes. But 2011, I'd say, is when we really actually started. And at that point, we were only just, spraying. So we were taking these conventional paints and we were spraying them. And that's when we really realized, hey, that doesn't work. It gives you a better finish, but we need to make a product that's also better. Because even if it looks better, it doesn't last, it doesn't give you all those other properties, what's really the point? So I would say 2012 is when SprayNet, as you know it today, really began, because that's when we actually started making our own products.
Yeah, and now you hold what, a dozen patents more?
Across a few countries. In the US, we've got 5 patents, and one, actually 2 now, probably pending. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the many things I liked about the SprayNet model is that I call it the secret sauce, right? So not only do you have patents, but everything you do is proprietary, or everything we do is proprietary. You cannot go to Sherwin or Home Depot or Lowe's or any big box store anywhere and buy our coatings. Can't do it. You can only get them through us, and we are the only ones who can apply it. And the processes are patented, or I should say the processes, some are patented, some are proprietary. But the point is, you've trained us, you trained your franchisees to bring the factory to the house, to bring the factory to the property. And what that means is we're trying to control the environmental factors in order to get the maximum adhesion. And when we do that, because we know how to do that, we can slap on a 15-year warranty on everything we touch. And that's, again, another thing that I loved about it, that's unprecedented. You cannot find that warranty elsewhere. Give me a little taste of that journey from, all right, I'm spraying on traditional paint. It's peeling off in a year. We got to do better. Are you a formally trained chemist?
Well, I became one just because, like, if you're talking to chemists, you kind of need to know what you're talking about. I guess it also helps to know how paint is formulated because you end up understanding what's possible when you're applying it. So I guess, like, it wasn't even just peeling. It was like sometimes, like, I'll give you a story. I had a customer, we painted his front door, and he was a super cool guy. And he's like, called me, and he's like, he's almost embarrassed. Like, I'm really sorry. My son just walked in and his school bag just scratched the front door. And he's like, can you come do a touch up? He's like, I'll pay you for it. I get it. It scratches. In my head, I'm like, no, it shouldn't be scratching that easily. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? So that's what actually started to make me obsessed with, okay, how do we now create a product that's like the factory, but on site? So what I did is I tried to go to a factory and I said, hey, can you give me those paints? Can you give me the paints that you apply on brand new doors when you ship them out? Because those don't scratch, those don't peel. So I finally convinced one of those factories to give me a gallon. What I realized about the gallon was, it was super toxic and smelled, but it also dried too quickly. So what ended up happening is we spray it on and start cracking because of the sun, right? So in a factory, they want it to dry quickly because they want to be able to wrap it and ship it out. Well, on site, the dry time is super important. So what I realized is getting the final film properties is one thing, because people always ask, why can't other people do this? And you can get those final film properties, like the hardness, the gloss. Those are relatively easy to adjust. What's difficult is being able to apply those consistently on site. And I think that's where I add value, because I sprayed hundreds and hundreds of homes. So I know what to look for when we're spraying, right? Whether it be sag resistance, whether it be, dry time, open time, all of these things is what make it difficult to formulate these paints. And then above and beyond that is, okay, well, how do I adjust this on site based on different ambient air conditions? And that's one of our patents.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you just getting introduced to SprayNet, when we're on site, we are taking temperature readings. We know the moisture readings. There's a scan code on the gallon of paint or on our pails of paint that we scan, our crews scan, to make sure we're doing it right? To make sure that this process is dialed in, so we can, because we stand by our job, we stand by our work, but behind our coatings for 15 years, which really, I mean, you can imagine if we're going to put a 15-year warranty on it, when it's in the, the weather machine for these tests that SprayNet's run, it's gone longer than 15 years, right? Because this is a business and we don't want to be doing warranty work and losing money. But that 15-year warranty, I haven't seen anything like that in my due diligence in painting.
Yeah, so we do accelerated weathering tests, and the secret to it really is because the application conditions matter so much. So when you buy let's say you go to the store and you buy a gallon, basically the application conditions that are ideal never really happen, right? And that's why you can't really warranty it. So it's not really the force of the product later, which is also one of the big characteristics that we have, because we create custom chemistry for your service. So for example, the example I give on a front door, we're not going to use the same product on your siding, right? Let's say your vinyl siding needs to be more flexible. It needs to be, there's different properties for each one. The gloss probably needs to be a bit lower. So on top of just having that custom chemistry, the application is so important, because, if we get technical here a little bit, the paint needs to kind of create a film. That's called coalescence in coatings. And if you don't create this uniform film, what ends up happening is those weak spots in that film is what causes peeling. So we know that if we're creating this uniform film, after the cure period, it'll essentially last forever, right? That's why we're confident in that 15-year OPA warranty.
Yeah, I mean, I've been wondering this from when we had dinner a few weeks ago. You know this chemistry inside and out, and I just assumed that you're a founder and that you put the team together and you hired the PhDs to do the chemistry for you. And I realized at dinner, and when we were talking, I'm like, no, he's directing the chemists to do their thing. How did you learn this? Right? You're obviously smart, but you had to train, or is it just, you do strike me as a guy who just figures it out. I say this to my kids all the time: figure it out. I don't do for my kids what my kids can do for themselves, and I like to think of myself as a figure it out kind of guy. Is that just you, or did you go get a degree, or what? How'd you learn this, man?
Yeah, well, I mean, our company values, right? Sharp and the artist for being resourceful. I guess I can be resourceful, and I think every entrepreneur needs to be. But man, it was like late nights just reading everything I could online, and then I actually, through online, found a few courses. So I went to the Chicago, I think it's formulation course. I forget the name of it. The Missouri Institute of Formulation. So I did some formal courses just to kind of understand how people are learning this, and then from there just did my own independent research, and then also through experience just working with chemists, understanding what variables move what within the coating, and once you start understanding that, then it's basically just dreaming. It's like, okay, cool, well, if because at the end of the day, there's rheology, right? How it sprays out, and then there's final film properties. You can really, if you want to simplify, to those two things. And final film properties is relatively simple because we know what gloss we want, what hardness we want, and there's a whole bunch of tests for that. But the application, that's really what was interesting for me, because I know that we're going to have to apply this, and if we're not applying this properly, it's not going to last. So that's where it's like, okay, well, if we need to make this more thixotropic or not, what can we do? And I think where the fact that I'm not from the painting industry actually helped. So we actually so I'll give you an idea. I'll give you a good story actually about one of our coatings, our door window coating actually. So one of the biggest challenges with polyurethanes is it's very difficult to make them thixotropic. What thixotropic means is that when they spray out, they get thin. So they thin out under shear. And then when they hit the surface, they thicken so they don't sag. Very difficult to do. So I watched this ad, and they were spraying this very thick liquid. I think it was lotion, and they sprayed it, and it was coming out, and then it was gelling. So I'm like, hey, what are they using as a rheology modifier? And we actually found it. We went to this conference in Vegas, and we found out what rheology modifier we were using. We used it in our coating, and it worked. And it was like, nobody's doing this in paint industry because they're usually just following the same steps that they learned in school, right? So by being able to adapt and understanding what we need, which is specific really to what we do, that's why we don't really hire painters. We're able to kind of create these products that you won't find anywhere else, right? And that's how it works, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to get on my soapbox for a second. I'm not that excited, or I don't think that it's completely ethical that big universities charge hundreds of thousands of dollars to get degrees where you can do nothing with them, right? And case in point right here, you didn't go get a PhD in chemistry. You didn't get a degree in chemistry. You took a few classes online, right? And you figured it out. I mean, all of the knowledge in the world is available. It's all out there. You don't have to go get a 4-year degree. Yeah, I get it. If you're going to be an engineer, you need that engineering degree. If you're going to be an attorney, of course, I got it. But you figured out how to do, fairly intense chemistry with a few classes and trial and error and self-education. And I've done very similar. My private equity career, I didn't get a degree from Harvard, right? I don't have an MBA from Georgetown, right? I figured it out. And I talked to people who are good at it. I watched a bunch of stuff on YouTube. I took some classes, right? Some online classes. I mean, you can essentially get, there's a thing called the no pay MBA where you can essentially get an MBA worth of knowledge in your brain for nothing online. So it's cool to hear you say that. And I'm not convinced you got to waste your money at a, 6-figure college.
And to be quite honest, so actually the two courses that I took were actually in person because I wanted to meet people, I wanted to talk to people. Most of my I guess quote unquote education is online, but those were in person. And what really struck me was how rigid the curriculums are. And I remember going up to the professor who was a PhD in chemistry and kind of telling him about my idea. And he said, "That'll never work." I said, "Well, okay." I mean, it did work, right? So it's just like they teach you to be an employee within a big organization, right? And they don't really want you to necessarily think outside the box because that's not really their business, right? That was actually a bit of a shocker because I'm like, just because you said it won't work, now I really want to figure it out, right?
I love it. I love it. That is, I mean, everybody should hear that story, and they need to hear a million versions of that story because that story is all over the place, right? You had a PhD in chemistry tell you it's not possible, and now you've done it, right? And granted, I'm biased, but I do due diligence, right? And I did my due diligence on SprayNet. I looked into this. I delve deep, and I believe in so much that I bought every territory you'd let me get, and that is just, I mean, I can't say how important that lesson is for those people because that the school system, I don't know how it is in Canada, right? Maybe it's similar, but here it is just be a cog in the machine, and the debt that people are being weighed down with these degrees is insulting. It's insane. It's predatory. There's nothing I like about it. And then you have back to SprayNet, you've got a PhD telling you can't do it, and now you've done it. And what's SprayNet done? Over $100 million worth of jobs?
Yeah, we're probably actually this year will be close to 150 million. Yeah,
150 million in jobs, and some nerd told you couldn't do it, and you're just like, okay, I'm not going to listen to you.
Honestly, to be fair, obviously the guy's smart. He got a PhD. I just
Yep.
don't think he understood what we were trying to do. And like that's the problem too, is like they just think they know everything, they just shut it down. And it's like, had I not been the way I am, I would have been pretty discouraged and be like, well, I guess it isn't possible, right? Even though he may not even had enough context to tell me if it's possible or not, right? And it's just like, why are you in a position to tell someone that something's not possible without even listening to it, right? And I think that's the downfall of universities and stuff like that. Is we get this arrogance in these professors, and I get it, but at the same time, that can shape people's lives, right? And you need to kind of take everything with a grain of salt. And to your point, is it different in Canada? I think it's probably very similar. The difference is we don't get in debt. I mean, universities relatively cheap here, but I mean, otherwise, is it worth it? I don't know. That's to be debated.
Well, what you see here in the U.S. is a kid gets out with $100,000 in debt, and you can't bankrupt your way out of that debt. It's horrible, horrible debt. And so you can imagine if you got 100 grand in debt and you're starting your life out.
Yeah.
And I've been in the lending game for a decade, and I've seen it so many times. It's actually heartbreaking. So I encourage people to, as much as they possibly can, figure out other avenues to get educated, because you don't need that piece of paper. Listen, nobody has asked me what my degree. You know what my degree's in? I have a degree in music. I'm a musician,
Nice.
right? But nobody in the business world has ever asked me what my degree's in. I just perform in the business world. So that's all that matters. Do you know your stuff? Do you get it done? Can you put up a scoreboard?
I honestly don't even know how I got my degree. I was running a business at the same time, right? And like I remember always having these dreams. Like I don't think I actually got my degree. So I never actually went to the ceremony. But a few years later, they called me and they said, "Are you going to come pick up your diploma?" And I'm like, "I don't really know what I'm going to do with it." And they're like, "Well, I guess we'll destroy it." And I'm like, "Destroy it?" I'm like, "That sounds a bit crazy. Can I come watch it?" And they just hung up on me. So I don't actually have my diploma. Although I graduated, I don't have the physical paper.
I think you've done pretty good without that physical piece of paper. 150 million of your creation has done is insane. So one of the things that, when I was doing my due diligence on buying a franchise, I looked at Canada and realized you really couldn't buy a SprayNet franchise in Canada, essentially sold out, right? Which is impressive. There's 41 million people in Canada, right? Now you've come to the US. There's approximately 350 million people in the US, larger market. How long have you been in the US market? 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah, a little over 2 years. Yeah, a little over 2 years.
Okay. So I'm not on the bleeding edge, but I'm on the leading edge, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
there's been a few folks ahead of us, but we're kind of early adopters. My prediction is in 3, 5, probably 5 years, we are going to be incredibly grateful that we bought this SprayNet franchise. When the United States, the population of the U.S. understands the value offering here, it's going to be really, really hard to get a SprayNet franchise in the U.S. I think you're going to sell out in the U.S. too. It might take a little longer just because of the sheer numbers, right?
Yeah.
But you've also got the momentum. You've improved your processes and your coatings, and you're coming in hot. How many franchises have been sold in the U.S. and tell me, how excited you are to be in the U.S. or what the challenges have been. What's been that, transition from one country to another? That's a big deal.
It is, but I mean, there's so many similarities, right? Like, I mean, we're your younger brother or younger sister, whatever you want to call it. Like, I mean, most of the Canadian population is right up along the U.S. border. So, right. So we basically watch the same TV. We do the same things. So, I mean, it was just a natural progression to go to the United States. Well, obviously very excited because most of our growth is going to come from the U.S. Like, it's fun to be sold out in Canada, but at the end of the day, you're sold out. Yes, our franchise will keep growing, but it's fun to have locations. And, you talk about momentum. Gab, right? He's the one who brought you into the franchise. He's been doing amazing with candidates. And what's been really, really good is like we're actually averaging about 2 to 3 new locations a month now. But what's good is, yeah, it's the number is the quality of candidates that we're able to attract now, which wasn't the case early on, right? Like, when you're coming into the U.S., even though we've got all this experience, this race car in Canada, people are still skeptical, right? Like, this is new to another country. So we weren't able to attract, but like, I think what I'm most proud of now is the quality of candidates we're able to attract and get into the system, which makes sense, right? Because they're able now to talk to U.S. franchisees who've done it, which they weren't able to do at the beginning, right? Through your due diligence, you spoke to Canadian franchisees, but you also spoke to a good amount of U.S. franchisees, right?
Yeah.
So now you're able to validate on both sides of the border, which helps tremendously. I think, we spoke about how much sales, that's in our history. I think in the next 5 years, we'll be doing close to over 100 million in sales annually with the U.S. And it's not even a huge stretch. Like, we're a third of the way there in terms of system-wide sales. And most of our U.S. franchisees are relatively new. Like you said, you're a pioneer. You're right. Most of the people that you spoke to are still kind of in their first year, right? So there's no, I think you also mentioned an upflip. We've got franchisees here in Canada that are going on their renewals, right? 10 years. They're doing multi-million dollars in sales. It's only going to be bigger in the U.S.
Yeah. One of the things that gives me hope, and I'm a natural optimist, right? But what I really like to see, because you send out a leaderboard, right? And you can see the leaderboard of the US, leaderboard of Canada. And then I look at some of these monthly numbers for these Canadian franchises, and I go, that's what they're doing. If they can do it, we can do it, right? It's far easier. It's like, breaking the 4-minute mile, or you name it. Once you see somebody else do it, it becomes way easier to conceptualize it in your mind. So I look at, we watch the leaderboard in Canada, and we say, listen, we can do it. If they can do it, we can do it, right? And we just are going to copy them. That's what we're going to do. We're going to model them, right? Yeah. And they, those people who are renewing their 10-year contract with SprayNet, they didn't have the Lowe's relationship, and they didn't have near of what you've provided to us. So not only will we get there, but I assume, and I think this isn't arrogance. I assume we'll get there far faster than they did, simply because we have more tools and they've broken the ground for us. They've shown us the way. Is that's all fair, right?
It's so fair. Like, you guys have almost basically an F1 car. They had probably a go-kart that you can go to the local go-kart place that like goes like maybe 20 miles an hour. Like, they had nothing. Like, literally the training was, got any questions? Like, if you have one comment, like, you guys have such an extensive training now. Like our website was not nearly what it is now. You're talking about the Lowe's partnership. We didn't even do kitchen cabinets back then. We didn't even stain brick back then. We didn't even think about roofs back then. Like, I mean, the depth of the concept today versus what it was 10 years ago is like night and day. So that's the thing, is that's what gives me comfort. If they were able to do it, there's absolutely no reason why the U.S. franchisees won't outpace that growth. It wouldn't even make sense to not outpace that growth, because above and beyond that, the population density is much, much better in the U.S. So, for example, Nathan, one of our great franchisees in Canada, his territory, he's got to drive 4 hours. For you know, like, you don't have that in the US, right? Like, the population is dense. So like, it's just such a more favorable market, and we're also more dialed in. So those two things together just make for, like, you know, something that makes way more sense here.
Yeah, you know, you provide us a launch coach, and then you provide us a scaling coach. And so we're in launch phase. Obviously, we're the new guys on the block, and so we have a weekly call with Bruce, our coach, and that's not sufficient for us. So I Teams message Bruce at least 2 or 3 times a week. I text him a few times a week. I call him. We have 2 meetings. Actually, we have a sales and a production meeting with him. And every time, you know, I'm a little tired of this, I jokingly say to Bruce, but dude, he's right about everything. And when we don't listen, you know, we're like anybody else. Sometimes we got to touch the stove with our own finger to see if it's hot. But everything he says turns out to be true. And, you know, we had a meeting last Friday, and I'm just like, whatever Bruce says, we are doing, and we're doing it when he says to do it. And we're not going to question it. You know, because before we're like, oh, you don't know Colorado, man. You know, it's like, dude, that is ridiculous. We're going to listen to everything you guys say, because you've got a 14-year history of doing it. You've got a coach who's trained up on how to coach us. He's seen people succeed and he's seen people fail. And
Bruce has been here for over 10 years. So he's done the job. He's sold jobs. Like, all of our coaches have done it and have been here for so long. That's another luxury that we didn't have in Canada, right? Like, we were learning how to be a franchisor at the same time as launching all these franchisees. So like, they didn't have any of that experience to leverage at all. And they also didn't have other franchisees to be able to call, right? Because there were none. They were all starting at the same time. They were all in the same boat. So it's night and day. Like, it's night and day. I lived through both, and I see the differences. You know, you guys are a way better set up for success.
Well, yeah, if a franchisee fails in the US or anywhere now, I mean, shame on them. It's their fault. 100%. It's their fault, because you've given us, everybody, the tools on a platter. Here it is. Here's the car. Here's the manual. Here's the guy to help you read the manual. Oh, you can't read? He'll just tell you what the manual says, right? I mean, you've done everything you could possibly do to make us successful. And we've had a hell of a launch, right? We've really come out of the gate, you know, firing on all cylinders. We've fired on half a cylinder of this F1 car, and half a cylinder on the F1 car that is Spraynet is amazing. We can't wait till we get in 5th gear and we're doing, you know, 250 miles an hour.
But yeah. you're so 2 things on that. Our responsibility, like, look, there's 3 pieces to have a successful franchisee, right? There's the concept, there's the support, and the person needs to be ready for it, right? You have to choose the right people. So, you know, our end of the bargain, like I tell people, the concept, we will continue to innovate, we'll continue to make it better. And I think we hold up that end of the bargain. Support too, I think we've got, you know, good support. We'll always get better. The thing that we need to make sure that we're doing, however, is choosing the right people. And that's extremely difficult, because, Chris, you know, at the beginning, you talk well, you sound like you know what you're doing. But I've spoken to so many people that, you know, interview well, speak well, and then we'll get to it and they're like, they can't do it and they can't handle it, and they get punched in the face once and they're done. And that's where our responsibility comes in. And it's like, how do we select franchisees better? Because I know we can do a little bit better, marginally so, on the support stuff. But man, if you don't have the right person, none of the other stuff matters. So I think we also do have a shared responsibility. And honestly, like, for me, if a location fails, as the founder, like, it takes a piece of my soul away. Like, I really do not want that to happen ever again. Like, it boils my blood to the point where, like, a mentor had to tell me, like, hey, have you supported them? Have you done everything you could do? And I say, yes. He's like, you can feel terrible, but don't feel responsible anymore. And that kind of gave me a bit of comfort because I'm like, man, like what else can we do? And it's just choosing the right people at this point.
Yeah, you can't want it more than them, right? You can't want something more than somebody else, and you can't drag someone across the finish line. I don't care how smart, how strong you are, you're not going to drag anybody across the finish line.
Well, it's funny because we were in a group meeting, and Bruce, actually of all people, your coach, he's like, hey man, I care more about their success than they do. He's like, doesn't make sense. He's like, I'm literally trying to drag them. He literally said, I'm trying to drag them to success. But he's like, they're not answering emails. They're not engaged. They're not following up with customers. He's like, I can't do that for them. I said, Bruce, I agree with you. There's nothing more you can do. So, because he feels horrible too. Like for him, if one of his locations fails, he hates it. Like I see him and I'm like, man, like we got to make sure to bring the right franchisees because it really discourages Bruce. And Bruce is a great guy and we want to keep him forever, right? So really our responsibility is how do we better select the right people? And it's incredibly difficult, man. I think it's the biggest challenge we have. It's so hard. It's so hard.
I mean, that parallels the hiring process, right? Like nobody has the hiring process dialed in 100%. Nobody. And so we've thought about personality tests. I don't know. I mean, I think what you're facing in terms of accepting franchisees is the same thing. The franchisees similar that we're facing in hiring our lead painter, for example, right? Yeah. And we just had to let somebody go. I really liked him. I thought he had a good heart, but we tried to get him dialed in, and we just couldn't. And it did seem like it was clear that we wanted his success more than he wanted. And but how do you I don't know. What solutions are you putting in place to hire? Or, you could consider a franchisee relationship a hire to a degree. But I mean, what are you doing to make these selections? How are you improving that?
So, I mean, to the personality test, because we've tried that. And like, that doesn't always work either. We had a franchisee score 99, and he was probably the worst fit we've ever had. And I don't know if he made somebody else take the test. I just don't know. But it was like, wow, like even these tests are not working. So, I mean, right now, honestly, like we have a questionnaire. They meet franchisees. They meet me. We do a confirmation day where they meet the whole team. The whole team votes after the fact. We know one thing that we do now is we check their financials because we used to take everybody's word for it. And we had franchisees that were drastically undercapitalized. And you know this, if you're undercapitalized in your business and you can't pay for marketing, it's not going to work, right? So that's one thing we learned is don't take people's word for it, actually check. So that's something new that we're putting in our process. But at the end of the day, also like it's somewhat of a gut feeling. It's crazy because, yes, a painter's a bit easier because, anyways, there's things to check for. The thing that you can't check for is, hey, Chris, when it gets really hard, are you going to give up or not? Do you have the grit? How do you interview for that? You can have a gut feeling about someone, but so the story I always tell, because I always remember this. There was a franchisee that I said, hey guys, like, honestly, I don't know if this guy's going to be able to do well. Like, I just don't see him selling jobs. I just don't see him motivating a team. He won franchisee of the year 3 years ago. Wow. And I generally get it right. Like, and this guy got it so wrong. And then it happened again in the US. I said, guys, this guy, I don't know. And I'll tell you offline who it is. And then I'm like, the neighboring franchise is going to end up buying him out. And most likely what's going to happen is the opposite. And it's like, man, how do we get it wrong again? And it's like, we're going to keep getting it wrong. I guess the point is, let's keep that under 10%. And that's kind of our goal is like, how do we minimize getting it wrong? And that's what we're constantly working on.
Yeah. I mean, you're never, welcome to earth. Everybody's going to get it wrong, and I think that's the right attitude is try to minimize your mistakes or not make your mistakes colossal mistakes, right? Have hedges within your system. When I was looking because I brought on a partner, Peter, and Peter Straub, he's my jiu-jitsu professor. He's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu, is an MMA fighter. And what I look for in partners, and I've got a fair amount of partnership deals, mostly in real estate, which are easier, right? They're less hands-on, but nonetheless, they're important. But I look for that. Hey, can you get punched in the face and keep working? you know? And obviously if you're an MMA fighter, you know, you can get punched in the face, but it is that ability to suffer to a degree, and keep going. It's that ability to, you know, lose money and then keep going, right? It's whatever the, you know, symbolic punch in the face is, you got to keep going, because there's no way you're going to avoid that. There's no way. What you do really, I think, in business and in life is if you're in somewhat control of your life, is you get to pick your suffering, right? The suffering isn't forced on you. You get to pick it, right? And I've chosen the suffering of right now. I've chosen the suffering of launching a franchise. And yeah, we've had a great launch and we've sold a bunch of jobs, but I won't pretend for a second that we've played it perfectly or that it's been easy. And so when picking a partner on this one, I picked somebody that I know will stick with it, because in jiu-jitsu, you get smashed and you get smashed over and over and over, and it's humiliating. It's physical. It hurts. It's a rough sport. They call it the gentle martial art. That's, you know, my knee and my rib and my shoulder and my back tell you it's not a gentle art, right? It's rough. But the people who are in it can embrace the grind, right? That my Marine buddies would say, embrace the suck, you know? And so I don't know how you test for that, but we have some veterans on our team, on our production team. They're rock stars. They're just solid, get it done, tough people, you know, and they're fun. The other thing I look for in a crew and in a partner is, can they make it fun? Even when it's, you know, we started painting a house we were doing the wrong color, right? We got the trim and the body mixed up, right? And it sucked. And we had to reorder the paint because we didn't have enough and all that. And after we, said a few curse words, then we just started laughing, and the whole crew just started laughing. And I'm like, this is what we want, because you can't just, of course you're going to make mistakes. And what do you do when you make those mistakes? It's hard to, how do you see that,
Yeah, you can. And honestly, one of the things that we really now put a lot of emphasis on is, would I want to have lunch or dinner with this person, right? Like, we're talking, I love talking to you. If this person calls, would I want to take this person's call? Because at the end of the day, if the person in front of you is reasonable, then it doesn't matter how hard things get. It doesn't matter if there's conflict, you'll get past it. So you see it throughout the process, depending on the kind of questions people have, depending on what they say, how reasonable they're going to be if things get hard or not, right? And sometimes they're not coming into it with the right perspective or frame of mind, right? Like, they think everything's going to be perfect. Some people even say, like, hey, I need to draw X amount of salary by month 3 or else I can't live. Well, I said, like, it doesn't matter if it's Sprain or any other franchise. I don't think it's the right time for you to have a franchise, right? Or any business for that matter, right? You should probably keep your job if you need that, right? So it's just those types of flags are relatively easy. But again, the grit part is, can you be reasonable throughout it, right? Can we coach you through it? Because some people just shut down, right? They go MIA, and then it's like there's nothing much we can do about that.
Yeah, one of the sales guy I brought into SprayNet, he's an old friend. We've done a bunch of real estate deals together. He's been an investor in my deals. We've done out-of-state real estate deals together. And we have used that expression. We're just reasonable dudes, right? We're just reasonable. And you can't do as many deals as he and I have done together and get through it without being reasonable, because, we've had electricians rip us off, and we've had tenants trash our place, all the problems that everybody has, right? Everybody's going to have them. Now, some people that happens to them and they freak out, they yell and scream, they cry, they quit, they do whatever. And Matt, our sales guy and my partner in various real estate deals, he and I just take it like, okay, this sucks. Yeah, we might drive home from the apartment building, cussing somebody at the windshield or something. But by the time we're done, by the time we're home, we've got some solutions and we're going to work on it. And it takes, at least for me, it's taken years to build those relationships, right? But you can't, if you're scaling a business and you're growing something of significance, you don't have years, right? You've got to fast forward some of that trust building and some of that due diligence. I call it personalized due diligence, right? When you're doing due diligence on their personality, right?
Right.
I had a limited partner. LP is an investor in various syndications or private funds in real estate or anything, right? It's a passive investor, an LP. And I had an LP say, I don't trust a GP, a general partner, that doesn't have scars, right? I don't trust a business partner that hasn't been beat up, you know? And I thought that was a great quote. I mean, his quote was, I don't trust a GP that doesn't have scars. I'm like, there it is. Boom. You know,
you talk to any entrepreneur, and the thing I always say this because, like, as entrepreneurs, we're not necessarily inclined to be whiners or complainers. So on the outside, everybody thinks that everything's perfect and we're lucky and everything's going well. But if you really talk to any entrepreneur, there is not one I've ever met who said, I don't have these battle scars, or things always went well, or this disaster didn't happen. The difference is they don't complain about it and they just move past it, right? Whereas, generally the people who complain about stuff are not generally the people who end up, doing things of significance. So it's you're right. And you see all these memes online and you see all this stuff, like get into business and that and this, and it seems so easy. And people have this this perspective about how it's going to be easy and be living the dream. You can eventually, right? Like it's rewarding, it's super rewarding, but it's not going to be easy. It's never going to be easy. Like it's just, so get that out of your mind. It's just not going to be easy. So if you want something to be easy, keep your job. But that's not easy either, right? So it's like, which hard do you want? Which hard do you want, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. Which hard do you want? Or pick your suffering. That's exactly right. I was talking to, and I've said this many times before. I was talking to somebody the other day and I reminded them of this. I think it's actually safer to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner, than to be an employee. Because an employee, they're dependent on their boss to provide them the job. They're dependent on the company to provide them their money. Where when you're a self-employed person, right? You're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur. It's on you. It's up to you to do it. I like that better. I understand some people don't like that, and everybody's got their path on this world. But I feel more safe owning businesses that I run than I would ever feel when somebody else could just be like, oh, I don't like Chris Law, I'd fire him.
Right. Yeah. Like for me, having my destiny in someone else's hands, I've never actually had a job. I just literally started a business when I was 18, and so I've never really been able to keep a real job. I had part-time jobs here and there, but I wouldn't be able to do it. But it's all I know, right? So I guess it's somewhat easier for us to say that because it's all we know. But people who don't know of it, it's like it's stressful. I get it. And sometimes. I've learned throughout the years to be able to empathize a little bit better with that because I'm like, what's your problem? Like, it's just all I ever knew. My wife would tell me like, hey man, like people had jobs, people had stable incomes, people like they're not used to what you do. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I guess you're right. I need to be a bit more empathetic with this. And that's kind of our role as a franchisor, is helping people make that transition. But it's not an easy transition to make. So for some people, it's much more difficult than others, right?
Yeah, I mean, we work specifically on empathy and grace in our culture, right? Because the lead painter does not think the way I think, right? They just don't. So I could, if I say, and Peter catches me saying this, I say this too much and I'm working on it, but I say, if it was me, I would just, right? And he's like, dude, he's not you. What are you talking about? Well, if it was me, I would just do this and this. But he's not you. He looks at the world differently. So, and that's another great thing about having a good partner that I have in Peter, is he'll call me on my BS right then and there, and I'll do it with him. When we started, we didn't know squat about paint, right? And Peter would say, hey, I don't know squat about paint. And he said it, a little while ago. I'm like, stop saying that. You can't say that anymore because you know a lot about paint now. You've gone through the training. You've got a personalized coach. We've done, 6 figures worth of jobs. Yada, yada, yada. Paint, right? Maybe you don't know as much as you will in a month, and you're always going to get better, but paint. So I had to call him out on that, just like he's got to call me out when I say, well, if I were him, I'd just, delete that because everybody's different.
Yeah.
Dude, I love talking to you. We could talk for hours. I'm off to do my networking group. And I know you're a busy man. Let's do this again. I've got, we always close these podcasts with something we're grateful for. So I'll start. I mean, I am just grateful that I was in, to a degree, the right place at the right time to get into this franchise. And I'm grateful for you for building this machine. And I'm really grateful for Bruce, because Bruce has got this tough love that me and Peter need. I mean, he comes from the athletic perspective, and we're both athletes, and he just tells it how it is. And I told him the other day, I'm tired of you being right, Bruce, but it's true. So, shout out to Bruce. He's our coach. What about you, man? What are you grateful for?
I think I mentioned it at the beginning. I'm grateful to be able to have built something that attracts such quality people, right? Like the fact that I'm on your podcast right now is amazing, right? Like we're attracting people that, a great podcast. You did the Upflip. You're amazing in it. You're going to build an amazing business. For me, that's why I do what I do, right? Like, so, I'm grateful for all the franchisees that are pushing the multi-million-dollar. Like, that's so gratifying for me. It's like we were able to create this concept that allows people to thrive. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for being on your podcast. I appreciate you having me, man.
Awesome, man. Let's do it again. And I've got a gazillion more questions all written out here. Let's chat again. Thanks, Carm.
All right. Thanks.
See ya.